Hello and welcome. My name is Muhammad Najma Zenryona, student ID 106012300196 from class DD47C, and today I'm going to be recording a video about using the Feldman model to criticize 4 pieces of artwork. I'm doing this video for my final task in my Aesthetics and Visual Communication History class for university. Alright, so before I go on to use the Feldman model, I should probably explain what that is. So the Feldman model is something that was created by a guy named Edmund Burke Feldman, and basically his criticism is divided into 4 pieces: a description, an analysis, an interpretation, and an evaluation. The description is basically just that, a description of what the piece is, what is the medium used, what are the elements present within the piece, what is the subjects within the piece, just like what is in the artwork in general, or what is in the design in general. This can be both abstract and concrete things. Whatever you see, you describe it and you write it down. For the analysis, this is a more formal analysis. As the name suggests, you are taking into account the principles of art and design, the composition, the lighting, and as I said before, the principles, so things like balance and unity and harmony and such. For interpretation, this is just your personal interpretation of what the artwork or the design could be about. It doesn't have to be objective. I mean, you can try to be as objective as you can, but you can bring in your own personal experiences into this interpretation. That is also fine. For these previous two, for the description and the analysis, you should try to be as objective as possible. And then for the evaluation, it is an evaluation of the artwork. Do you think it succeeds in what it tried to do? How does it chalk up to other pieces? Is it better or worse than other similar pieces? And how well does it convey the message that it is trying to portray? Right, so the first piece I'm going to be looking at is this piece right here. This is a loading screen for the game Crusader Kings 3, specifically for the Fate of Iberia DLC. Let's start with the description. This is a digital painting done in Adobe Photoshop in what I presume to be a 1920 by 1080 canvas. It could be higher, it could be 4K, but generally it is still that 16 by 9 ratio. It's depicting a scene in which there are 2 people playing chess with a bunch of people surrounding them, either watching them or doing their own stuff. On the floor here, you have a bunch of geometric patterns, which I will explain later in the interpretation possibly. For lines, you have the lines within the brick walls, you have the lines here, you have imaginary lines making up the outlines of the people. For shapes, you have again in most of the architecture and in the properties, you have this sort of semicircle stacked lanterns there. As for space, you have space being given from the perspective, so from here to here, this is sort of vanishing that way. This is its own space, and this is its own space further back. It's also like, for the perspective is also like doing this thing, so this is representing or symbolizing that yes, this is a 3D brick wall which is leading backwards, and there's also a stairwell here leading upwards, giving a sense of like verticality. For the texture is done mostly from the rendering. If you can see the brick wall right here, there's a bunch of rendered textures, and you also get it from like the seams and the cracks and the bricks, and you can see this really everywhere, from how the cloth is rendered to the carpet with the messy lines, and I guess the light, the glow here from the lanterns. It's also giving off like a, like a light texture, and especially with the gold here with the reflections and the skin. That's where you predominantly see the textures within this piece. Color, yeah, right, color. So the colors here are mostly, they're not too saturated, right? They're the classic like sort of oil painting style colors. You have your blues, your greens, your yellows, and then you have your reds here as well in the carpet and the clothing. Again, they're not too saturated. They are not too high key, because they're on the perimeter where the light isn't shining. Over here, yeah, I think that's going to be enough for the description. For the formal analysis, I'm going to break it down into the principles of art design. And I think one of the most important principles for this piece is the contrast. This section of the piece right here is way higher key than the outer sections of the artwork, so it gives that sort of like vignette vibe, right? So you have, these are just like darker, you even have like blacks here where the light isn't shining, and it brings attention to this in the middle right here, which is obviously the focal point of the piece. I think that's enough for the formal analysis. Let's get on to the interpretation. So as for the context behind this piece, again, is it's a loading screen for a game which is depicting a scene within medieval Islamic Iberia, which is currently modern day Spain and Portugal. Right. This is within the midst of the Crusades. And so I think the meaning behind this is that the chessboard here represents enlightenment. It represents knowledge and culture, and it represents the idea that the Islamic kingdoms within Iberia at this time were really focused on knowledge. This was during the Islamic Golden Age, after all, and revolutionary stuff was being studied within astronomy, within physics, within medicine. And so I think this chessboard does represent that, and the different styles of clothing represent the diversity of Islamic Iberia at this time, with not only Muslims from different cultures, but also with Jews and Christians as well contributing to the society. And even though it is a male-dominated space, these are mostly men, you also have women being able to participate, and I don't know if this is a child. It looks to me like a child, at least from the proportions. Yeah, it seems to me like a child can also look upon this and strive to be enlightened within the Muslim world, or within Muslim Iberia. And then the second meaning comes from this man right here again, which is again being drawn attention to by the rhythm, the repetition behind him. And I think he represents the darker side of Islamic Iberia, which is about to collapse, right? We know that Islamic Iberia collapsed. Yeah, essentially the Reconquista happened, and Iberia was successfully under Christian rule again. Well, let's get on to the evaluation. I think it conveys that message really well. It conveys this sort of uneasy atmosphere, which makes sense for the time period that is trying to represent. You are playing as either Christians who are wanting to reconquest Iberia, or you're trying to play as Muslim rulers who are trying to keep Iberia within their control. So, as a loading screen, I don't have any issues with this at all. It conveys its message perfectly. Right, so next piece we have here is going to be an Eastern aesthetic piece of artwork. This is a cutscene graphic from the visual novel Mahotsukai no Yoru, or Witch and the Holy Knight in English. This is from chapter 10, and this is Sojiro, and this is Alice. Sojiro is carrying Alice on his back. He's taking her home while the snow is falling. This is right after a sort of magical fight Alice got into, and we can see sort of the red blood, her blood coming out of her stomach, and you can see she's also like sort of visibly in pain. Let's talk about the elements for the description. For lines, you have again outlines. These are actual lines. This is a line art, so there's no imaginary lines here. This is just actual lines. You also have lines. I guess these are shapes actually on Sojiro's jacket, and Alice's jacket also forms like this. What's it called? I don't know what this is called, but it's sort of like a semicircle as well. Semicircle shape here. And you also have like circles for the heads, obviously, and circles of low opacity for the snow. Right, let's move on and quickly talk about the formal analysis. I don't think there's really a lot to analyze, but there is like a lot of principles within one sort of element, right? So let's talk about the background first. There's a gradation here, right, from the cool blue light from the top to the red. It's a blue, purple, red gradation. I think the blue and the cool and the warm really harmonize really well as colors, especially with the sort of purple in the middle. It's also giving a sense of simplicity to the artwork, to the piece, right? It's not too full. It's just a solid background with a gradient of light, and then you also have the snow on top to symbolize that it is in fact happening during the winter. As for Unity, it is mostly using that sort of blue to red color range, right? You also have the difference between the contrast between that and the skin tone, which I think is another principle within this piece. Another thing I want to bring attention to is the composition. The composition is diagonal this time, so it's pretty much equal from this part to this part. It's also giving a sense of forward motion that way. And moving on to the interpretation, this piece really has not much to interpret, I feel. Right? If you know the context of the story, this piece is immediately obvious as to what it means. But like the forward movement here, Sojiro is carrying Alice home. For the expressions itself, Sojiro is kind of upbeat. He's happy. He's glad to have been able to save Alice from the magical fight she's been in, which is symbolized by the blood here. Alice's face, she has this sort of mix of tiredness. She's sort of hurting. She's like holding in the pain, but she's also relieved to be saved by Sojiro, who she didn't really think much of beforehand. I think there's also the sense of like warmness to this piece. I believe it comes from the red here near Sojiro. Like Sojiro is such a warm person, especially the breath here, right? There's a difference between the breath of Alice, which is almost like non-existent, to Sojiro's breath, who's heavy like breathing. He was running around, and he's trying his best to save Alice in this moment. So I mean, there's not much to interpret here. It's a very simple scene in my opinion. As for my evaluation, I think this is one of the best CGs, cutscene graphics within the game. It is. Moving on to our third artwork. This is Ukiran Jipara. It is a wood carving from Jipara. Well, it's actually two things. It is a wood carving, obviously, but it is also a photograph of the wood carving. For the elements description, we have imaginary lines again for the outlines. I mean, you have actual lines here being carved out, right? lines in the water. You have lines for the logs and the walls. You have shapes as well. You have rectangles. You have triangles. You have squares for the head, well, at least, almost squares for the head. So texture, you can see like these are textures of leaves and such. That the lines make up the texture of water being carved into the wood. As for the color, I mean, it's all just a wooden like brown color. Obviously, there's differences in value depending on how the light is hitting the wood, but it is all the same color. As for space and depth, there is a sense of depth coming from the perspective, from like the river, right? I mean, it's not technically in perspective, but you can sort of imagine that that this is going deeper into the piece. And then there's also this like cool little like actual depth with it being a carving and whatnot. For the formal analysis, we have, I think, a sense of harmony here, right? This is a sort of snapshot into the life of a village, like this village near this lake, on this lakeside, right? You have the trees, the buildings, the people, the animals. It just gives a sense of like busyness, and that brings together this harmony of a village life. There's also, the contrast here, it's mostly between like size, right? This is smaller and this is bigger to indicate like distance. Sorry, this and this. And there's sort of like the light and the dark, light and dark coming from sort of depth of the carving. There's also a rhythm, right? You have the rhythm of the water with the recurring waves, and you also have it with the logs and the walls. For my interpretation, I mean, what is there to interpret other than it is a snapshot of village life? It's showing that village life isn't exactly slow. It can be busy, right? There's ships flowing down the river for, but perhaps trade and whatnot, and you have farmers tending to their animals, and the women of the village, maybe like taking, bringing lunch to the worker or whatnot. I mean, it shows like a village can still have sort of hustle and bustle without it needing to be like a really packed city. As for my evaluation, I think, like, even as someone who knows absolutely nothing about wood carving, I can see that this is a masterpiece. This is a masterwork of art. Like, I could not imagine carving like every single one of these leaves, and like the texture of the water, and then making it sort of the size gradation from small to big. It's like it's so many things that like give it a 3D sense of perspective, despite it being a 2D like carving that like I just wouldn't expect within a carving of wood, which I think is really great. Last but not least, we have this final piece of art that I'm going to be analysing. This is the key visual for the game A Space for the Unbound, released on Steam and other consoles. So for the description, this is an illustration of two high school kids running in the hallways of their high school during, well, what I presume is the afternoon with this light. For the lines, you have the perspective lines vanishing at one point for the whole. You have the outlines of the characters in like red line art, like red or brown. You have the lines for the building, the architecture. You have the lines on the floor here of the tiling, also on the walls here as well. For the shapes, well, you have squares, you have some rectangles, you have let's go to the colors. So the colors here, they're mostly cool colors, right? It's mostly like blue, like to that gray that's going into blue, right? With the shade here, with all the tiling. This is also like blue gray. You have this brown on, like, I think this is like a door or a door frame for the classroom, and then the light is like more like yellow, warm. There's also a chromatic aberration effect we can see most predominantly here. So you get your greens, your purples, your reds, your oranges scattered around. It's a really cool effect. For texture, I mean, I think most of the texture is given from like this chromatic aberration effect here on the tiling. You don't really get to see the tiling of the texture. I think here you get to see like this texture of like the wall. I think this is a bit like of like dirt texture. You see this like, I think this is supposed to be wood. You can see the wood is like plants growing on it as well. For space, again, it's like given by the perspective, right? This is further behind, and here gives a sense of 3D space. All right, let's get on to the formal analysis next. I think the colors harmonize really well. The cool blues and this like really warm like yellow. It's really nice. Gives us again, it gives that afternoon feel, the afternoon vibe. It gives this sort of like nostalgic color feel. The contrast again, these colors harmonize really well because they contrast. The yellow and the blue. For rhythm and repetition, again, you have it within the tiling, on the ceiling, on the floor, on the walls. Yeah, it gives your eyes a direction to move in, right? Front to back. For gradation I think is mostly used within the lighting. You have this gradation of light to dark. It's not, I mean, this is pretty harsh, I think, for a gradation, but I think you can mostly see it in like here, even though it's like really covered by the chromatic aberration. For unity, yeah, I think it's got to be the chromatic aberration that gives it a sense of unity. It's all over the piece. And for balance, well, I think the text gives this piece a lot of balance, because without it, I think it'd be really heavy topside, right? I mean, you have both the both main characters' heads on the top here, so you gotta have something on the bottom here to make it feel more balanced, obviously. So you put the title of the game right there. So for interpretation, this is the character. Sorry, I'm blanking on the name. For the interpretation, we have two characters here. This is Raya and this is Atma. They are lovers, high school friends, and yeah, I mean, they're having fun within the hallways of their high school in the afternoon, and that sort of nostalgic coloring gives this piece a sort of sadness to it. And if you know the context of the game, it is very important to know that that Atma here is in the light, right? His feet are in the light, his face is lit up, while Raya is very squarely in the shade. Her face is not touched by the light, and this is a sort of a difference in headspace, a difference in mentality, a difference in emotional space that the game really explores within the story. As for my evaluation, I think it evokes that emotion of nostalgia quite well, right? I didn't grow up in the 1990s in Indonesia. I wasn't born in the 1990s, but it still gives you that nostalgia of, oh yeah, this is the peak high school like vibe, like it's sort of timeless in that aspect, even though that, yes, this is supposed to depict the 1990s. No matter what generation of Indonesians sees this, they're gonna think back to their high school days, and I think that really succeeds in that emotion. Well, I think that's going to be it for my analysis. I'm sorry if I was too rambling, or if I didn't do enough. Bye bye.